The great ones, they're different. They really are. Not better, just different. Sure, there's a physical power, a mental strength, a complex but resolute constitution too. There's a whole lot more than just the measurables. That's something else, that intangible. It separates us from them. Welcome to the Legends series on Andy Raymond Unfiltered. He's one of those ones that's impossible to dislike. Whatever jersey he wore, whoever he was playing, there was just something about him that we enjoyed and respected. Understated, captivating and competitive. But who is Stacey Jones?
I mean, it's a question I've never answered before, but, I'm a pretty simple bloke. Especially right now in my life. I enjoy a beer.
Yeah.
I enjoy a punt on a Saturday afternoon. I enjoy golf and I enjoy fishing. And to be able to enjoy all that, you've got to keep your family happy. So I'm very close to my family, my wife, my children, my parents and whatnot. So to be able to do all the things I said first that are luxuries to me that I really enjoy, obviously my family's pretty close.
Beer, punt, golf and fishing, no wonder we're mates.
There are the last few months, I've spent some money on the punt and enjoyed a beer, a couple of mates within our bubble, so it's been a bit of fun.
You were born into rugby league. Your grandfather's a Kiwi legend who played 23 tests, a tough and uncompromising prop, Munga Emery. What do you remember of Grandad?
Look, I never got to saw him play, but obviously he was a big part of why I started playing the game. The game's always been in our family. My uncles played it. My father played more rugby, but played a bit of league at the back end of his career when he got older, and my older brothers played it. So really my memories of my grandfather aren't from his playing days, because I never got to see him play, but just heard stories from guys that he played with. But my grandfather obviously was a big support to me. Actually taught me more about fishing and those sort of things rather than the actual playing of the game. He was a front rower.
Yeah.
So a bit different. Yeah.
He actually played in probably the most famous Auckland side of all time. In 1961, Auckland beat the touring Kangaroos 13-8 at Carlaw Park. Have you heard stories from that magical day?
Actually, no, I haven't, Andy. I heard more about it as playing for the Kiwis, more up in the when he went up to England and played up there and against some tough French teams, but I never heard too many stories about when he played against Australia and that one in particular.
You were born in 76, so I'd assume the All Blacks side of the late 80s were the national heroes. Names like Buck Shelford, Zinzan Brooke, Grant Fox, Sean Fitzpatrick, to name a few. Despite your family lineage in rugby league, was rugby union ever a serious option for you as a kid?
I guess if you never played rugby growing up as a kid in New Zealand, you were a minority. So, I dabbled in a little bit. My father was more of a rugby man than a league man. But, yeah, I got up all hours of the morning to watch the All Blacks play and was a massive fan of theirs. But, my passion was rugby league, and the rugby league, the Kiwis of the 80s were my heroes, or the guys that I looked up to.
Which names stand out as rugby league heroes from that era?
Oh, the obvious ones for me, Clayton Friend and Gary Freeman. Yeah. But, you had the Tarmatys, Mark Graham, Dean Bell, the Sorensens, James Lulawai. There's that 80s team, especially I think it was around 1985 was my first real memories when they had a real good test series against Australia. Yeah. I think they got beaten 2-1. New Zealand won 18-0 in 85, and that was a very fond memory that I have of that era.
You grew, not a whole lot, to an impressive 5'7" and 82 kilos as an NRL player. Were you the little kid as a junior?
Yeah, I was, always fairly small.
Yeah.
I think 5'7" probably pushing it a little bit. But yeah, no, I was always small. I had the luxury of having two older brothers that were much bigger than me. So I grew up in a bit of a knockabout sort of a group of brothers where, I get bashed around a little bit. So I was fortunate that it gave me a bit of a good upbringing.
Was footy just fun or was it a goal?
Oh, it was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun. I guess it wasn't really. It was more of a goal when I probably got there. But look, it was always fun. Playing in the backyard, even just kicking the ball around by yourself. Those memories. But footy was always fun.
Early 90s, before you came through, before there was such a thing as the Warriors, what did you think you'd be doing in later life?
Yeah, good question. I'm not too sure, actually. Look, my father was always very pushy towards getting an apprenticeship if you weren't to go on and get a degree or anything like that. So I'd imagine I would have, probably fallen down that path of, maybe it was a builder or a plumber or electrician. He was massive on pushing, his kids towards making sure that we, had an apprenticeship or went on and got a degree. So it probably wasn't going to be a degree.
You played Lion Red Cup in '94, the domestic competition. As a young footballer, the Warriors arrived in New Zealand at the perfect time for a kid with a bit of talent, didn't they?
Yeah, it was perfect timing when I look back and the hype around the Warriors coming into the competition because that early 90s period, the game of rugby league took a massive boost in New Zealand. It started to it was more on TV. Sky Sport had just started and, they had, 3 or 4 games every weekend on TV and it gave it a massive boost and the hype around the Warriors coming into 95 just sort of really was a cream on the top for the game to take a real boost in this country.
April 23, 1995, you make your NRL debut. You came off the bench versus Para in a absolute flogging. I think you got them 40 points to 4. What do you recall of your debut?
Look, it was back in the time when you only had 2 fresh reserves. I don't know if you remember that, Andy. Yeah, so I played reserve grade that day. Previous to all of those rounds, I'd sat on the bench for the first grade after playing reserve grade, and there was about 8 or 9 blokes that would sit on the bench. And I was fortunate enough to get a run that day. The team were up by a fair amount, and I came on the field and I actually stole a try from Phil Blake. So, memories of that. I think I only played about 3 or 4 minutes, and then probably the one and only time I went to the blood bin in my whole career.
You're listening to Andy Raymond Unfiltered, the Legends series. We have corporate and private sponsorship packages available. You set the terms. For further information on how you can become part of the team, go to the website andyraymondunfiltered.com.au and hit the sponsorship tab. Greg Alexander was the team halfback that year. He was injured for a fortnight. You stood in his place, and this kid did enough in 2 games to hold on to the position and move Brandy to fullback. Your rise from unknown to the man was quick. Did it feel like everything was happening fast?
Yeah, it did. I guess I was fortunate, not in a good way, but the team weren't performing at the time, and the coach, John Money, who I'm very thankful for giving me my first start, gave me an opportunity when the team wasn't going too good, and there was a few other blokes, young guys that got a run too. So I was very lucky, and I was very lucky to play with Brandy and learn from him and see how he went about business. So I had a good mentor at that time.
That was one of the real positives for New Zealand Rugby League, I thought, when the Warriors came in. Yes, there were some big names, and yes, there were some old hard heads, but it was the birth of a new era, very exciting young Kiwis getting the opportunity to play at a home ground.
Yeah, look, I guess, from an international point of view, it certainly helped the New Zealand Rugby League with having a Warriors team in the competition. And it also opened the eyes up more for Australian teams. And it's happening now where they're coming over here and grabbing all the talent. So I guess in the early days it wasn't so much, but it certainly was getting bigger. So the talent in New Zealand was certainly coming out and helped the international game.
Does that get frustrating over the years? Yes, it's wonderful to see young Kiwi boys realise their dream and make some money and play NRL, but does it get frustrating as a guy who wants to keep them all in New Zealand and let them play for the Warriors?
Oh, when you're part of the coaching group, without a doubt now. But look, I understand. We understand the way that it is, and our game is all about opportunities.
Yeah.
And, sometimes there's young Kiwis in here that are growing up in New Zealand that need to get out of New Zealand and get a fresh start, and we've seen that happen multiple times. So. We wish that they would all stay in New Zealand and play for the Warriors, but, that ain't going to happen.
Let's go back to 1995, and later in the year, you were selected to represent your country. You've always been very laid back, a cool dude who doesn't show emotion or let it get to him. But how did it feel knowing you had been selected for the national team?
Look, it was a dream come true again when, at that time I think about, when you look back at, we spoke about that 80s era, even talking about what my grandfather, him playing for New Zealand. So it certainly was a proud moment for myself and my family. But I was very fortunate at that time, the coach being Frank Endicott, who I knew was our reserve grade coach at the Warriors. And there was a whole lot of Warrior players that were in that team too. I had some really good mates, playing there as well. Yeah. So I was very lucky. Another good mentor of mine, Stephen Kearney, was in that team. Gene Namu, Haichiro Cassini, Sidera, who, we all became very, very close with.
That World Cup was held in the UK. It's a very different place to what you were used to in Auckland. Was that your first big trip away, and what type of experience was it for a 19-year-old kid? Looking back, there was a few little things that went on at the time. We weren't sure if we were going to be playing or not. I remember there was a pay dispute, and for me, I just wanted to play rugby league. But I understand now, what the senior players were trying to achieve. Crazy times in our game, 95, the pay disputes in that World Cup. Super League signed players were banned from representing Australia. What do you recall of the headlines, the news, and all this talk of a rival competition, and is the World Cup on and is the World Cup off? Are you thinking, hang on, guys, I want to live my dream here and play for the Kiwis?
Yeah, look, Andy, at that time, I don't have, a very clear memory of what was going on. Yeah. I the headlines, what was happening in the media or whatnot wasn't a big deal to me at the time. I listened to what the older players were talking, what they were thinking, and they were just saying stay tight with what's happening with the group and whatnot. So at that point of time, it was really a blur to me what was going on.
As a 19-year-old, which players did you look up to? Which players did you listen to? Who were the old hard heads that took you under their wing and looked after you?
I've always already mentioned Stephen Kearney. Yep. He was a big part of that part. My career, Brandy again, I mentioned him at the Warriors. Dean Bell. I was very fortunate enough to have some really good, strong leadership players that I played with, and the Kiwis, Matthew Ridge was one. Yeah. Very strong personality, but I know Ridgie, how he played the game was very tough, but off the field he cared about his younger players.
Did you enjoy the off-the-field elements of rugby league as a young bloke, the travel, the different countries, the different lifestyles?
Yeah, I did. But I also, when it was too long away from home, I missed home. But look, again, I enjoy, having a beer after the game, the sheds with the players, going back to the hotel, and having a bit. And, back in those days, you could enjoy it a lot more. There was no social media, so we didn't have to worry too much, guys sort of being young blokes and making fools out of themselves. So, and that happened, but, I really enjoyed it, and I look back at with some really good memories. And, we never did anything that was bad. We just, made fools out of ourselves sometimes.
Your Kiwi debut, you replaced Gary Freeman as the national number 7. Huge boots to fill. The Wiz was a national hero. Was there pressure to perform immediately for you?
When I look back, I didn't feel it, because I do remember clearly Frank Endicott and Matthew Richard Captain at the time saying, just go out there and enjoy yourself and play your own game. So, that obviously took a lot of pressure off me, but, it wasn't looking like it was going to last too long. We were playing Tonga and we were down. I can't remember what we're down by. It might have been 8 points with, not long to go. So it was looking like it was going to be a disastrous debut. But, again, I look back at that and like you said, filling Gary Freeman's boots, who was an idol of mine, was something that, I didn't take for granted. I knew that it was something that I, had to be humble for. And, look, I look back on it and with some good memories.
The Warriors were Super League affiliated. Did you simply, as a 19, 20-year-old, just follow the advice of the senior guys and stick together as a unit? Because a lot of clubs in Australia didn't stick together as a unit and playing groups sort of splintered off. When I look back at it, I remember just whispers going on as a young. I wasn't part of this is what's happening, because I hadn't at the time made my NRL debut. So I was part of the reserve grade team then. So I wasn't really privy to what was actually happening at that time. So I think what happened, they signed all the NRL players, and then a couple of days later, John Money grabbed myself. Joe Vagana was another player in that group. I can't remember who else. Might have been Tony Tatupu, and got us into his room and said, "Boys, go to this hotel, knock on this door, whatever room it was. You'll meet a guy." And he said, his last words John said to us was, "Don't miss the boat." So that's all he said. So we didn't have, we had a little bit of an idea, but once we got into the room and at that time, walked out with a smile on my face. It was like Christmas had arrived early, wasn't it? You hadn't played a game and someone wanted to give you more money for not playing a game.
Yeah, pretty much. However, I wish it was probably 3 or 4 months later when I had probably played a few NRL games. And so I mean, on the scale of things, my Super League check was right down the bottom of what everyone else. But that's the way it is. That's the way it goes. So, but I was happy at the time.
Any elite athlete will tell you it takes more than just being physically fit to be at your best. And our friends at Galaxy Finance can have you at the top of your financial game. From home loans to investments and self-managed super funds, they provide complete solutions. Call Galaxy Finance on 1300 91 7740 and mention you heard it on Andy Raymond Unfiltered to get an obligation-free chat to see how Galaxy Finance can assist you. Mate, looking back at Super League, I still believe the concept was right on the money, but maybe the execution could have been improved. As we sit here some 25 years later, is that a fair call? Or what do you believe about Super League and the concept of it?
Yeah. No, it is a fair call, Andy. Being a young guy at the time when it was all happening, and you can understand the frustration of, the people that have been part of the game for a long time, the history, some of these clubs that aren't around anymore, or part of the NRL, you totally understand the frustration and how it went about and could have been done better, possibly. However, it enabled the game to grow. It became a big business, and it enabled players to get a real good earn out of the game for putting their body on the line for a certain amount of time or window in their life. So it had to happen. Was it the right way? Possibly not, but it's happened, and the game's better for it.
The volume of coaches at the Warriors in the first decade: John Mooney, Frank Endicott, Big Mark Graham, Daniel Anderson, Tony Kemp. Who had the biggest influence on you, do you think?
Oh, look, they all had an influence in some way or another. Obviously, John Mooney gave me my debut, so very, very thankful to him for trusting in me and giving me that opportunity. Frank Endicott, I had a very close relationship, in reserve grade, and then going into the Kiwis. Mark Graham came in probably the toughest period of anyone, really. 2 years, and I learned a lot from Mark about how he played the game, but he didn't necessarily say we had to play it like him. Mark was very smart in how he went about things, but unfortunately for him, coming in at a time when we'd lost a lot of experience at that time, so it was tough for Mark. And then Daniel came in, and probably Daniel I learnt the most from as far as football went. The fundamentals of the game, the technical side of the game. He probably taught me and the rest of the playing group more about that than anyone. And I think he'd been under Brian Smith and the way he coached. Tony Kemp, who we had as a assistant coach, who I thought was a really good backup for Daniel at the time. Was very supportive, and knowing that he'd played the game and what he went through was very good. But Kempy only had 1 year as a head coach, and it really turned tough for him when we got off to a bad start. I think it was in 2004 when he took over from Ando. So all of the coaches there, I learned something from, and I have good memories of them all.
Are you a footy head? Do you love the tactical, technical side of the game, talking footy, analysing your game, analysing your opposition game? Is that you, or are you a free spirit?
I think I'm in between.
Yep.
Really, I certainly can switch off and go, no, I don't need it anymore.
Yeah.
Or I can get in depth, and I think when I look back now as being a coach, I probably wish I had been more of a footy head than the other side. So, but the good thing now is that there's a balance to it too.
Yeah.
You can't be too technical, they've got to be here or be there, because out on the field, things happen so quickly. And, that's, as a coach, that's what you've got to try and understand that as well. So, but also give them the right amount of information.
It's a wonderful ability to have, that ability to switch off from football, because sadly not all young men and not all young rugby league players have the ability to switch off. They live it 24/7, and I guess it's got the potential to occupy too much headspace and burn you out extremely quickly.
Yeah, and I think nowadays more so, I think it's, because it's a big business and players can earn, some really good money, that they know that their career can, be for only a certain amount of time. And I think that they've somehow got to be like that. But, the good ones are able to probably switch off and go home and just take a back seat with everything. Whereas, if you can get too emotional about it and focus too much on it, it can become very, very tough. So, but I feel that the players probably need to be, in the moment more now with footy. When they turn up to work, they've got to make sure that they're ready to go. And, right now at the Warriors, you can see the really good players do that, and players that aren't quite as good, probably don't last as long.
Off the field, the business model of the Warriors club was questionable. They were sold twice, bankrupt in the first 6 years as well. Eric Watson bought in 2000. Was he the saviour?
Looking back, yes, because I don't know if he didn't take over, would the club have still been around?
Yeah.
So I don't know, would the NRL have come in and taken over the club? Possibly. But someone needed to step in at that time. The owners at that time, I remember it was very tough for them. They were losing money. They couldn't pay the players for a couple of months there. So I guess when you look back at it, yeah, he was.
It appeared at this time players were preparing to walk away from the instability of the club. You were the first to re-sign and show faith in Eric Watson and his crew. Was that a gamble? Did it come with risk or pressure, or were you confident in your decision that it was the right thing to do?
I felt at the time it was the right thing to do, but only because there was no certainty, with the owners at the time. Like I said, we hadn't been paid for a couple of months, and they were saying, yeah, you'll be getting paid. So, that was difficult at the time. And then I had a lot of players at the time saying, what are we going to do? What are you going to do? So I had, and we were going away to a World Cup. So we're going to be away for, 2 months. And I was very keen to get my future sorted, as well as, there's probably 8 or 9 other younger players in the team that were looking for some direction at the time. And Matthew Ridge was a part of the Eric Watson group, so I had meetings with Ridgie, and every time I spoke to Ridgie, he was always pretty honest with what was happening. So it was very difficult times around that era of the club.
We hope you're enjoying the Legend series, Stacey Jones, Part 1. In Part 2, we speak about the Warriors' first grand final, his move to France, and any regrets in a simply captivating interview with one of the all-time greats. The Rugby League talk here won't stop just because of the off-season. To help us out in continuing to bring you podcasts like you've never heard before, subscribe to the poddy and leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you may be listening. Come back soon, Legends. This is Andy Raymond Unfiltered. Welcome back to the Legend series, Stacey Jones, Part 2. In Part 1, we spoke about the family history, his debuts for the Warriors and the Kiwis, and the early years at a struggling club. The conversation continues. From 95, when you were the young kid learning and following, was only 5 years later. It was 2000 and you had become a leader at the club. Is that an easy transition, Stacey, for you?
I guess I was never a natural leader.
Okay.
I guess my leadership was more on the field, what I did for the players, as far as, the position you play, you've got to be a leadership. If you're a half, you've got to be in that leadership group. So, but away from the field, I felt I grew a little bit, and when you have young players come through at the time, you feel like you've got to own it a bit more. And when you look back at that early 2000 era team, it was off the back of a good balance, of some really good young kids coming through: Ali, Clinton, Francis Malley, Monty, Lance Ohio. So we had a lot of young kids coming through at that time with a lot of talent.
6 years of battles. In 2001, you guys made the final series for the first time. Was it a relief? Was it a reward? Did it feel like the tough times all of a sudden were worth it?
Yeah, it certainly was a relief. when I look back at it, I mean, we played Melbourne in the second to last game of the season. We drew the game and we walked off the field like we'd lost, and we walked in the changing room, and Daniel and Kempy were in the room jumping up and down, cheering. We were like, we drew the game. Yeah. We should have won that game. They said, well, we've just made the playoffs. So, and that time, okay, all right, it felt more maybe a relief that the first time the Warriors had made a playoff, and probably not the right attitude we should have had at the time. It was, okay, we made the playoffs, what's the next job? And next job, we went to Parramatta, we played a cracking hot team in 2001 at Parramatta and got 50 put on us. So, yeah.
You were also named co-captain with Kevin Campion. Was that a special honour? What did it mean for you to captain the Warriors?
Yeah, it was special. For me, captaining the Warriors, obviously playing there as a 19-year-old, going through all those other years beforehand, and then given the opportunity to captain alongside Campo. And we worked really well together. I loved captaining the team with Campo. He, we were both never big talkers. Yep. We sort of were more what we did with actions, more so Campo. But it was a good balance.
Yep.
That group, Campo coming in and what he'd achieved in the game, winning premierships with Brisbane and going to grand finals with St. George and that. So, we knew that we had a leader there that had been there and done that. It was a really good balance, and, I really enjoyed it.
For me, one of the most underrated players over the last couple of generations, Kevin Campion. I don't think he gets the credit for his impact on the field because, very simply, there was no one tougher. And I thought he was a footballer as well. It wasn't just muscle and whack. There was a bit of brilliance amongst it all.
Yeah, no, Campo had a lot of finesse. I think he used to think he could play in the halves, and he probably could have. But, I know you say Campo doesn't get the accolades that he deserves, but he certainly, in New Zealand at the Warriors, he's held in high esteem.
The following season, it just clicked. What was the difference?
I think those players that I'd spoken about, Henry, Clinton, Ali, Lance O'Hai had come on the scene then, so we had a good balance. And Ivan Cleary, too, at fullback, was probably probably the bloke that just kept everything calm for us. You see what Ivan does now with his coaching. Well, he did that playing for us. So we had a good balance of players. We had a tough forward pack, with Jerry, Tukes, Arwen, obviously Campo, Logan, Villa. And, it was probably a period where I was able to play my best football. And I had a really good dummy half. I had a PJ Marsh who was, he was outstanding. The deliverance that he would give you, his craftiness around the ruck, So I think at that time we just had a good balanced team.
That was the year the Bulldogs were stripped of their competition points for significant salary cap breaches, and significant as in very bold text there. You finished minor premiers and you were grand finalists. Unfortunately, you ran into the Sydney Roosters on grand final day. What a side that was. Yeah,
they were just cracking red hot. Defensively, they were a step ahead of everyone else. They just took time away from you. I remember playing against them. I think they beat us by 40, second to last round of the season, and then they just took away your time. They were aggressive line speed, and then obviously they're attacking with Freddie leading the way. It was very tough. So,
The Roosters side and their defence that season, did it change the game and how the game was played?
I think so. The way that you defend that, and I felt that they, you can't get up every week to defend like that. At some stage, it'll sap you. But they did it for 3 or 4 years. The way they did it, I think 2003, 2004, they make those grand finals. So yeah, they did it for a long period of time. And, it was very tough to play against.
It was one of the most brutal grand finals I can recall, 6-2 at half-time. And then just after the break, you scored a try. That try.
Marsh combining with Jones after CUC. You gave them an opportunity. Here's Jones in his space. Jones is inside the 10. Jones scores. New Zealand are level. New Zealand are level.
But just have a look at Jones. Dummies to Lauatuti. Steps left again. Through the gap. Comes to the fullback Phillips. He's a good defender. Didn't go close to getting him. Avoided the ankle tap from Brad Fittler. He's beaten 5 or 6. Punches the air. And he's a chance for his team to go in front with the conversion.
Oh, this is unbelievable. This is one of the best grand final tries you'll ever see. He's beaten 5, 6, 7 players. No one laid a hand on him in the end.
What can you recall from that moment?
Yeah, look, I remember, going in at half-time, I felt, we were right in the game. We were unlucky not to score right on half-time. I think it was Justin Murphy was chasing a kick and the ball bounced one way. If it had bounced the other, he would have scored. And then coming in at half-time, we were feeling pretty good about ourselves. Fortunately for us, we got off to a good start. Jerry took the ball into the line and offloaded and gave me a bit of space. And it's one of those things that you just go, wow, you see the try line, just go for it. And, it was a special moment, but obviously I'd give that back any day to have the win.
Griffin Air Conditioning offers the highest quality of air conditioning sales and service across the Sydney metropolitan area, providing installation and maintenance to commercial, domestic and industrial customers. Working with this team, you'll be guaranteed the latest services, technology and developments in the industry. Visit griffinair.com.au and tell them we sent you for a cool deal. You scored a total of 106 tries for the Warriors, the Catalans, Dragons and the Kiwis. Is that the best try you scored, or at least your favourite?
Oh, look, I haven't thought of what your favourite try or favourite moment is, Andy. But then, that certainly is right up there, and it's probably what gets talked about the most if people talk footy to me.
Do you still smile when you think back on it?
No, only because I know the result.
Yeah.
If the result was different, then yeah. But look, it was a moment, but it wasn't the moment that I wanted.
I thought you were constantly brilliant. You would say you were consistent because you like to play things down. I'll do the talking up for you. What's your key to minimising the difference between your best and your worst performance and maintaining a level of consistency you can be proud of?
I really feel that to be consistent as a half, you've got to be able to defend. I felt that defensively my game probably wasn't where it should have been.
Okay.
I think now there's a lot more focus on the defensive part of the game.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more, like back probably when I was playing, and even before then, it was okay. Let's try and hide your playmakers, your halves, your smaller men, and maybe trying to do that too much probably took away from that. Now the way that halfbacks defend now or halves defend, no, you got to be as good as anyone. You got to be as if you're a poor defender, then there's no place in the game for you. You're gonna, sometimes you're gonna have a big four running at you, but you've got to put your body on the line. And I feel that when I played good footy, I defended well.
After 238 games for the Warriors, you decided to move on. You headed north to France at just 29 years of age. Looking back, was it the right move?
Probably not. Was it the right move to go to France? Yeah, but at that time, maybe not. And I remember talking to Ivan about it. Ivan was our assistant coach at the time, I told Ivan, I went over and said, "Oh, look, I'm going to France. I've just signed for 2 years." And Ivan said, "Oh, bugger." I just felt I needed a change at the time. And Tony Kemp was our coach at the time, and I really liked Kempy. But Ivan was taking over the coaching role the following year.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, I want you to stay." And I said, "Well, it's too late, I'd signed." And if I'd known Ivan was going to be the coach, probably would have maybe changed my mind, just from a fresh approach, really. And I knew what Ivan was about. But, that move to go to France probably was always going to happen. So I can't look back and say, was that the right or wrong thing to do? I'll always say it was the right thing to do for me and my family at the time. However, if I look back, it may have been a little bit different, but who knows?
How hard was it leaving the Warriors, the players, the fans, the friends, and the family? Because it's a huge move. It's a life-changing move.
Yes and no, but I always knew I was going to come home.
Yeah.
Not play, but I always knew Auckland was always going to be my home. So I knew I was always going to come back and see everyone. I just felt at the time it was time for me to have a change at that time for my career and go and enjoy my footy. At the time, I wasn't really enjoying it as much as I should have been. Because like you said at the start of our chat was, did you play it for fun?
Yeah.
And I did, and I wasn't enjoying it at that time.
Your last match for the club was the final round of the 05 season, a win against Manly, and fittingly, you scored the match-winning try with a few minutes remaining. At full time, however, was it a feeling of emptiness, one of achievement? Were you looking forward to the challenge? What do you recall of that feeling at full time, thinking, shit, this is over?
Yeah. I vividly remember at Brookvale that night. I'm not too sure, Andy. I remember Des Hasler coming into the room and shaking my hand and saying, "Well done." I thought that was really needed, Des, to come in and do that. But yeah, it was probably more of everyone knew what was going on at the time that I was, leaving the club. Everyone at the Warriors. So it was just the moment, and just that was it.
Your time in France, was it an easy transition for you and the family, or did it come with difficulties?
It wasn't easy, but it wasn't hard because I knew what I was getting myself into. I knew, hey, we're going to a country that, English is not spoken a lot, and they do things differently. And, so I was given the heads up. I was spoken to a few people that I knew over there who were a part of the club leading up to it. So my family were at the right age to do it.
Yeah.
So I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I knew that to enjoy it and was, hey, you got to get out of your comfort zone here and, just throw yourself into it. And that's what we did.
In the UK Super League, the goal for everyone is the Challenge Cup final. You got there in 07. Where does that sit in your list of achievements?
Yeah, I think that's up there, really, Andy, because the Challenge Cup is huge in the UK, and to do it in our second year with the Catalans was a massive achievement. It just brought the game in the south of France to another level. The amount of support the club had around that time was unbelievable. So, clear memories of going to Wembley. It's a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
Kick-off. The sun was hot in London, so it was really good. But unfortunately, we got beaten again.
Was that the year the Cup actually returned to Wembley, as in the new Wembley, the launch of the new stadium?
Yeah, it was. So, it was a special occasion for everyone. It was a sellout crowd. It was.
Is it awesome? Wembley,
it was.
Standing in the middle?
It was fantastic. Like I said, it was a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
I think kickoff was 2:00. It was really hot. And, people go to Wembley for the occasion.
Yeah.
We had a lot of support there for us, a lot of support from other English clubs, which was really neat.
You'd signed for 3 years. You returned home after 2. Was it homesick? Had the body given up, or was the mind just burned out? Was it time for a rest?
Yeah, it was time to come home.
Yep.
We'd done 2 years, and I think it was around that Challenge Cup time. I said to Mick Potter at the time, I think I'll be heading home after this. Body wasn't really. I'd had 2 injuries while I was here. I broke my arm, then had a minor knee operation. So I just felt the body wasn't sort of coping at the time, and family as well. We're feeling okay. We've done our 2 years. They were ready to go home too. So I thoroughly enjoyed the 2 years that I had there, but I knew it was time.
You rejoined the Warriors as a specialist staff member for 12 months, and then out of nowhere, you announced you were back for 12 months starting the following year. Good or bad move?
I look back at. I thought it was a good move for me. Again, Ivan was the catalyst behind it all.
Yep.
He asked me while I was back, was I fit, kicked myself, and he said, mate, why don't you have a crack? It's come and be as a bit of a backup for us at that time. And I thought, well, I'm still young enough to do it.
Yeah.
I didn't commit. It took me a long time to make the decision. I trained for a good 2 months with Craig Walker, who was a strength and conditioning coach at the time, and there was no commitment to play then. I just had to see where I was at, and Ivan gave me the opportunity to have another crack, and there's no pressure on you. There was no money involved. There was money. I had to get paid, but it wasn't like I was getting big money. It wasn't anything to do with that. It was just, hey, here's an opportunity to help the club out one last time. And I didn't imagine that I'd be playing that many games at that time. But it was a tough year. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed it. I felt that body-wise, I contributed and played as best as I could have. But there was a few things that happened that year that made it a very difficult year for the club at the time. In particular, I think the Sonny Fire thing really had a huge impact on the club at that time. I remember it was one of to me, it's the biggest thing, most devastating thing that's ever happened to this club. Coming back after Christmas and that memory and that moment, was devastating.
If you're enjoying Andy Raymond Unfiltered, the Legends series, we'd love for you to go to Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening and subscribe to the podcast and give us a 5-star rating and review. Best weekly review wins an Unfiltered Trucker's hat. You just mentioned that you were going to be back up for the young kids. I remember that quote from Ivan Cleary in announcing that you were coming back. But you still had it, every bit of it. You showed up the kids, you played 23 games. It's a nice way to finish.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess the amount of games I played was really good. Like I said, I only expected to play a handful. And it turned out otherwise. So, like I said, I have no regrets about doing that. Ivan actually spoke to me. He said, "Do you want to go again?" And I said, "Look, I don't think so. I think that'll do me. You got a lot of good kids coming through now. So I think they might have signed Jimmy the following year, Jimmy Maloney, which was a great signing for the club. For a young kid coming in and getting his opportunity. So, yeah."
Do you still enjoy watching, seeing and helping the young kids develop as footballers and develop as young men?
Oh, without a doubt. If I look back at my first year of coaching, when I coached the under-20s in 2014 and seeing a lot of that group go on and play, NRL, and there's still, a few of those guys playing at the club right now, and it's a massive thrill to see, young kids, being able to, make their dream come true and play footy at the highest level.
Voted one of the greatest players never to win a premiership. Does that still hurt, or does time heal?
Only when people bring it up.
Yeah, thanks, Andy.
Look, yeah. You look back and you look. There's you look at players that have won multiple premierships, and just it just goes to show that that can be done, and that. However, then you look at players. There's a lot of players that probably didn't even get to play in grand finals that probably deserve to win 3 or 4 premierships. So I just look back and be grateful for what I had and what I was able to do and enjoy the game.
You're a very humble young fella, so I'm going to read through the more significant personal accolades you've been awarded. You've probably got time to make and then eat lunch while I do this. At the end of the list, I'm going to ask you to nominate what's most special to Stacey Jones, the person. You're a New Zealand Sports Hall of Fame member, Rugby League Golden Boot winner in 2002, the 2006 Honours List, an Officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit, New Zealand Warriors Life member in the first, a runner-up in the Halberg Awards for New Zealand Sportsman of the Year, the New Zealand Rugby League Player of the Year 3 times, an Auckland Rugby League Immortal, and an NRL Hall of Fame inductee in 2019. Does one stand out above the other?
I think for me being inducted into the Rugby League Hall of Fame, for me that was very, very special. And you think about so many other players that deserve to be there, that should be in there, and for me that's it's a huge honour because the game of rugby league is what gave me all those other things, and to be inducted into the Hall of Fame is probably the top of that list.
It's not an official award, but in 2005, former Prime Minister Helen Clark said, and I'll quote her, "Stacey Jones is the epitome of a New Zealand champion." She'd go on to explain her comments, referenced you as a footballer as well as a person. How did that make you feel, a country's Prime Minister tossing up compliments like that?
Oh, yeah, obviously, hey, that's
wow.
Very kind words from her. Probably because I was on her march one time. Go for it. No, look, at the time, vivid memories of it, but, when it comes from your Prime Minister, it's obviously very humbling.
Do you recall the first time you heard the nickname the Little General?
I don't, actually. No. I mean, we don't. I mean, around the group, around my footy players that I play with, none of them call me that. So, yeah.
What nickname do they call you?
Just Jonesy, really. It's the main one. Yeah.
Little General's not a bad nickname. You've been called worse over the years.
Yeah. Oh, plenty. I'm not going to say anything.
Good boy.
Yeah.
At a time when the game in New Zealand desperately needed someone to stand up, you did, time and again. It's my belief there were times that you actually kept rugby league relevant in rugby union crazy New Zealand. Are you proud of that?
Well, I don't believe it. So
your contribution to the sport. Are you proud of that?
Oh, without a doubt. 100%. And there's many, everyone that plays the game, contributes in some way or another, So I'm proud of what the game has given me. I'm humble for what the game's given me. And, that's the most important thing, that, you're a part of playing the game at the highest level. And I'm proud of that. But I'm also extremely grateful for what the game has given me over, pretty much all my life.
We've been mates since 95, and despite what's going on around you or how tough the situation may be, you've
Always got a smile, a warm handshake and a very welcoming nature. For me, the man you are off the field even exceeds the one you were on it. It's been a pleasure, Stacey Jones. You, sir, are a legend. A new episode of the Legends series drops every Tuesday and the weekly Wodge every Thursday. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening and follow us on social media at The Andy Raymond. Then you won't miss a thing. Come back soon, Legends.